My name is Linda Ellenshaw Thompson. I am a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. I'm a third generation in the film business. My grandfather was Walter Percy Day. A little aside, at the time Percy Day was a widower, and my father's mother ended up marrying him. So therefore he became Peter Ellenshaw's stepfather. He really brought the art of visual effects and matte painting to England. And so he was well known. He worked for Alexander Korda as well as some of the top names in the business at the time. My father, Peter Ellenshaw, originally met him as an apprentice, where he worked on Treasure Island, and before he came to America and ended up working, the first film he did for Disney in America was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which won an Academy Award for Special Visual Effects. My father went on to work on over 30 live-action Walt Disney films, including Mary Poppins, for which he won an Academy Award. My brother is Harrison Ellenshaw, and he started his career at Disney Studios and went on to work on numerous films, most notably Star Wars. So I had, throughout my formative years, if you will, I was surrounded by artists and visual effects. When I was a young girl, I remember going to the set with my father, and I looked around and I said, "How come there aren't any women here?" He said, "Well, the script girls here." They called them script girls at the time. And I said, "Well, there aren't any other women." He goes, "Oh, this is too dangerous for women to do." And I thought, that might have been the first time where I went, wait a minute. Really, my first job out of college was and this will really date me, but my father said, why don't you go work at Disney? And I got a job in sales processing. 8mm was something that people could purchase, and the titles were educational for little kids, things like Donald Duck teaches dental hygiene or that kind of thing. After a year, I thought, I'd really like to do something else. My brother, this is where the nepotism comes in, my brother was working on Tron. He was associate producer and co-visual effects supervisor on the original Tron. And I begged him to hire me. And he denies this, but I remember it quite vividly. He said, "No, I'm not going to hire you." And I said, "Well, why not?" And he said, "Because if you're not any good, I won't be able to fire you." Well, apparently something must have happened because I got hired. I worked in post-production on Tron. Tron was quite complex, not just in computer graphics, but we had codoliths, which were cells, and each frame, to add the colored circuitry on all of the costumes, was added in essence like an animation piece where it was inked and painted and all of that, and these cells had to be put together and had to be shot by an animation camera person. The first mentor I think I had, and the first person that made such a big difference in my career, was the scene coordinator that I worked with, and his name was Don Button. He was very particular about how things were to be done. It really taught me a lot, and he was very patient and very good. And the reason it was so important was because this was long before digital. If there was a mistake that was made and it was hours to shoot the scene, it would all have to be redone. He was so great with teaching me and being very, very open about everything that was going on, that eventually by the end of the time that we worked together, I was writing the exposure sheets. He was giving me shots to do on my own. And he really gave me a lot of encouragement and trust, which made a big difference in really making me kind of think this is a great career for me, because it's challenging and I'm supported and I'm interested in it. The next job that I got was on Something Wicked This Way Comes, and it was also at Disney, so I fell right into that job. I was assisting an airbrush artist and working with animators. All of this working with artists and growing up with artists was really helpful later in my career. There's a temperament for artists, and there's a way to work with artists to inspire them when times sometimes are challenging and schedules are very tight. I didn't want to get my jobs because everyone knew the last name Ellenshaw. So I changed my last name to my married last name, so I was known for many, many years as Linda Lemon. And I applied for work at Boss Film, which was Richard Edlund's company that he had set up fairly recently with a lot of the team that had been at ILM. And I got a job there as a receptionist for their model shop. And it wasn't too long after actually getting that job, and by the way, that was wonderful working in the model shop. They were doing some really cool stuff because we were working on Ghostbusters at that point in time. The person who was the visual effects coordinator on Ghostbusters, which would probably be now known as the visual effects producer, but anyway, he needed an assistant. But I think we were just about to finish with Ghostbusters. I was out of town with my husband, and I got a call from Richard saying, "How soon can you get back here?" And I said, "Well, you knew I took a week off to be away." And he goes, "No, we need you to come back and take over for Mike Kelly, who was the production supervisor on 2010, because he was going on to be an editor on another film. They felt like I deserved that to be able to take over for him." When I worked on 2010, we had to make the planet Jupiter implode. That took entire post-production to do that one shot, and we used a Cray computer. And if it failed, we didn't have a movie. And that was the first time where I thought, wow, I've suddenly been bumped up to, this position that really was quite a leap for me from being an assistant to taking over for that. So that was it was really special time for me. I worked at DreamQuest for a while. I worked at Buena Vista Visual Effects for 7 years, and being not only just when it was a single facility, but when the facility was sharing with other facilities, working within a facility as a visual effects producer is extremely complex, and I think sometimes more complex than when you're a studio visual effects producer, which is they're almost two different jobs in a way, because within a facility you have a large team and you have other shows quite often going on within that facility. So you have to not only have a lot of negotiation skills with the other visual effects supervisors and producers as to what the teams are going to be and what the facility, who's going to use what kind of assets at what time, and that's a lot of moving parts. Dick Tracy, that certainly was a unique movie. I think we had to do 70 matte paintings. It took a long time because it wasn't digital. Warren Beatty was the director. So we had the last painting we're working on. We're looking at it in dailies with him, and he says, "Hotel Grant. I think that should be Hotel Grand." We had to get the artist to paint it again. It's like 24-hour shoot the whole thing again, so it would say what he wanted it to say. It's always been a team between the supervisor and a producer to me. That's the thing I've loved about the job is I've worked with terrific people. But you start with breaking down the script, which means, budgeting it, and having that knowledge of working in a facility as well as getting bids from facilities means that when you're doing the initial breakdown, you have a really good idea of what that script is going to cost, because that's what the studio needs to know. One of the big upsides to working in the business to me is every film presents its own challenges and is exciting in that way. For example, Evan Almighty was a film that had tremendous obstacles because we were filming a movie about Noah's Ark where it's animals 2 by 2. They seemed to think, we'll allot this amount of time, they'll have, shoot the animals, and that'll be done. Prey and predators cannot be filmed together, animals cannot. They really had to be filmed all individually, almost in every case, because they get distracted, they had to be trained. It's months and months of training to get them to just walk from A to B you know. So we lost the lion on the stage one day, for example. It was on the set, and it was like, has anybody seen a lion? I was a production executive at Disney for 3 years. So I had a completely different perspective of the way things worked, overseeing over 40 films over 3 years, and coming from that of seeing how the studio thought of things. That's one of the other things I think as a visual effects producer it's a very fine line and something that has to be dealt with very carefully, which is how to deal with the studio and the filmmakers so that both are knowledgeable about what's going on. In order to do the job and in order to be hired for the job, both the studio and the filmmakers need to sign off on you. So that's the first thing. And of course, like anything else, if they know you and have worked with you before, generally you get the next job because they want you. And so that happened for me quite a bit. The studios trusted me, and so I did end up working with quite a number of first-time directors. The producer's in charge of the budget for the movie, and he or she reports to the studio. But occasionally you will get a call from the studio and they will say, what is going on here? They'll want to report. You have to have the relationship to be able to say, you know, I cannot tell you that right now. I need to talk to the producer and let him or her tell you, what's going on. Also, you have to have the experience to look ahead and say, whoa, if we go down that road, that's not going to be a good thing. I got to steer the ship over here before that happens. The relationship with the supervisor is of the utmost importance, I feel. That's a team that, I've worked with many supervisors, and I've been so fortunate because it's been a great relationship with, I would say, almost every one of them. But it's always a team. And if there's a problem, we're talking about it together and then with our team. Business has changed so dramatically over the 35 years in every way. It's much more global than it was when I started out. We filmed in Southern California. Now, in the last 5 films that I did, we're all out of town. The last 2 or 3 out of the country. Obviously, we changed from analog to digital, which, by the way, doesn't make it any easier. Everybody said, oh, that will make it so much easier. It makes it easier in some ways. However, the work always expands to fill the time allotted. It always does. So now we can do anything that's asked of us. It just takes a little more time. And the responsibilities changed. The budgets have grown, 20-fold from what they were, and now visual effects producers are considered department heads. When I'm on a film, I'm there at the table with all the other department heads. I do believe that some of us have fought for that. That is the way it should be, and there are still many more men who are visual effects supervisors and women that are visual effects producers. That's starting to change, which is a good thing. But I think that it's important for women already in the business, as well as those starting in the business, to support one another. Most recently, when I worked on The Huntsman, it was the first time where I really walked onto a set and the director was happy to see me. And if you have a director who will sit and go through things with you, it does make it easier because then they're knowledgeable about what you said. So when you first do your breakdown and you say, I've allowed for 10 shots here, and this is the way I see it. If they're willing to sit down and they're not always, sometimes it's just how much does it cost, and I don't think it should cost that much, and then you got to sit there and go through it. I guess the short answer would be hopefully the producer on the film, you can sit with that person and explain it to them. You can go as a team with them to the director and say, you know what, we have to cut $500,000 out of this. Where do you want to cut this out? Can you do that in 4 shots instead of 5 shots? I think what's kept me in visual effects for so many years, and why I actually do miss it now that I have chosen to retire, is that every film is different, and that I do cross paths with people that I have worked with over the years. And there are so many wonderful people that I've worked with that's nice. And that as you work, the longer that you're in the business, the more you get a little bit of a shorthand with knowing who you want to hire. You know, sometimes like with family, you don't always get along, but you really go through it together. And I always say that the best thing about it is if you can have a common enemy that's something you're trying to get past that isn't a person, that's something as a group you're trying to get past. And one of the films that I think about that for is
Scary Movie 2.
We had to make that movie, the entire movie, in 5 months. So the common enemy in that case was our incredibly difficult schedule with the Wayans brothers going to movies every day because it was a parody of other movies and they wanted to be timely. So constant changes of now we've come up with something like that. You know, it's only a few weeks left and they came up with something new. So we finished the movie and I had money left and I was so proud of myself. I was so proud of myself and I got in trouble because they said, you can't do that. You have to let the accountants and everybody know exactly where you are. I was all proud of the fact that I, had $50,000 left or something. They said, no, you can't. So you have to, that's where the honesty comes in. You have to, they have to know that. They might have wanted to spend it on wardrobe or something, I don't know. It's not always that way and then it's not always as fun, but I also remind my team, I say, the times that are really the struggle and you think, oh, I can't believe this is happening, or something's going on, are the ones that have the best stories later. But it's a business that is all-consuming. It's your life. You work hours that are far more than people that are working in other kinds of jobs. So you have to find some joy in it. Otherwise, you're not going to keep doing it. Ideally, in the perfect world for visual effects producer, you would go in, have everything planned out, everything would be storyboarded, you'd know exactly what you were going to do, you get on with the job, you deliver the job, everything's great. It doesn't happen that way because while you're filming, they want to have the creative allowance to be able to make changes. I think we do a lot more shots now than we used to do because time on the set is so expensive. So I've found sometimes where I've been on a show where it kind of gets lazy. They just won't even move something off the set a few inches so you don't have to paint it out because it costs us so much and we're just not going to, we want to roll right now. So you get a lot of more cleanup work than I think I ever did at the beginning. I worked on a film, Cirque du Freak. They thought that was going to be a big franchise. And it was so quirky. I actually thought, well, maybe it will be, but it didn't turn out to be the quirkiness that they wanted. Obviously, everybody likes the films to be hits, but you work just as hard when they're hits or not hits. Ultimately, I did do some associate producer work, so I kind of moved up towards on my last film, but it was still producing with an eye on the visual effects. For those coming up and starting out, get whatever job you can, do the best you can at that job, and stand out, because then you're going to be noticed when an opening comes up. Be as honest as you can about things. If you don't know the answer to something, which is going to happen, you're going to be asked to do something, you don't know how to do it. Be okay with saying, I don't know the answer, but I'll find out. And if you can find a mentor, terrific. Having people who request you for a job is probably the ultimate compliment. And so those have been really important moments for me when people have recommended me for something or when people have said, we want Linda Thompson on this show. I always found my own personal joy in being able to budget something at the beginning and then coming out at the end and having it be the budget that you said it was going to be. That's just a personal thing. I loved that.